So as part of our study of the Rome's war with Hannibal, we need to get background on the Roman Empire, particularly the Roman Republic and the early Roman Empire. So not the emperors and the Praetorian guards and that sort of thing, much earlier. So we'll learn about the early Roman state and its government. To understand its peculiarities, look that word up in class. Something's peculiar. What's peculiar about it? Doesn't really mean what I think you think it will mean. Develop some analysis skills. Etruscans, a people. Romulus and Remus, monarchy. Tarquin, tyrant. Res publica, republic. Consul, annual. Senate, SPQR. Legion, dictator. Cincinnatus, farmers, promotiones. We'll go through all these keywords as we go through the lesson. So let's start. Central Italy, 800 BC. This is around about the time Rome appears to have first appeared. As just one small town in the center of Italy, surrounded by lots of others. Now, in the Rome's own foundation myth, there's a story of Romulus and Remus. And according to all this, these two guys, suckled by a she-wolf, semi-wild, great warriors, founded the city in 753 BC. How much this is true? Not much, we suspect. But certainly, around about this time, Rome becomes a place that appears on some maps. But it's really being dominated by other people called the Etruscans. The Etruscans, as you can see here from the map, are a much larger group than Rome. A group of cities sharing a common culture and language. And they're really the people who gave Rome their civilization. They taught the Romans how to build stuff. They gave the Romans everything today we think of as Roman. The Romans paid them back by crushing them so well we have their written language but we can't understand it. The Romans crushed them so well. What we do know about them, however, the Etruscans, apart from teaching the Romans about aqueducts and building things and not having mud huts, having things of stone, is that eventually the Etruscans became the rulers of Rome. And they had a series of Etruscan kings. And the final Etruscan king was this guy here, Tarquin, or Tarquinius, or Tarquinius Superbus, or Superbus. And he was the final king of Rome. And in 509 BC, the Romans got rid of him. He was a great tyrant, did many things they didn't like. So in 509 BC, the Romans got rid of their last king, Tarquin. And they declared that Rome was going to be a res publica, a public thing, which is where we get the word republic from. This is the origin of the word republic. A state that's not ruled by a monarch, it's ruled by the people. A res publica. In the Roman Republic, this is how they worked it. They elected from all the rich men a Senate. And the Senate ruled on behalf of the people. That's what the famous SPQR comes from. The Senate and people of Rome. The Senate and people of Rome, SPQR. To rule the city on a day-to-day basis, every year they elected 2 consuls. 2 consuls were elected for 1 year. The annual elections, you ruled Rome, or you ruled, you led an army for 1 year, and at the end of the 1 year, somebody else took over. There's a new election, and a new consuls were elected. During that 1 year, you had what's called imperium. You ruled like a bit like a king, and that's why you see this symbol, the fasces, bundle of sticks and an axe. You had the power to punish and the power to execute if you're leading your army. Like I say, power really resided in the Senate. Rich men of Rome got together to decide how to do things. And they were determined nobody could have too much power. That's why there's 2 consuls and they're only in charge for a year. And to defend their new republic, every citizen who could afford it, depending on how much land they owned, had to be in the army. So they're a citizen army, well trained to defend themselves, led by the 2 consuls. Except in times of great crisis. If things were going really badly wrong and Rome was in a terrible state, they had a sort of clause in their constitution. They could appoint what they called a dictator. A dictator was appointed for 6 months. So instead of 2 consuls, 1 dictator, and he ruled absolutely, but only for 6 months. In this picture here, the most famous of these guys is a guy called Cincinnatus. In a famous Roman story the Romans loved telling, he was ploughing his fields during a time of crisis. The Romans came to beg him to become dictator for 6 months. He said, okay. He got his armor, got his stuff, led the army, won a great victory, saved Rome. And then some people said to him, why don't you become king? He said, no, well, 6 months is over. And he quietly went back to his fields and gave all that power. That's how the system meant to run in times of crisis. So how does all this lead to an empire? Rome's one city. Well, for quite a long time, they were threatened by Etruscans. So to defend themselves, they ended up sort of conquering Etruria. And then they've got new neighbours, and Umbrians, they conquer them. And then they're at war with the Samnites, because they're their new neighbours, and they conquer them. And because they're always afraid of being attacked, they end up fighting their neighbours. Plus, if you are a consul, your chance for glory on the battlefield is 1 year. So in your 1 year, you make sure you fight some wars and expand the empire if you can. And in this way, Rome steadily spreads. And slowly, by around about 200, 250 BC, Rome is covering most of what we today call Italy.